All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome, everybody. This is a kind of a big evening. We have lots of information for you, and we're so glad that you were able to join us. We are recording this just in case you want to watch it again, or if you want to pass it on to a friend. I am Tracy Smith, superintendent of this fabulous place called Rincon Valley. Super proud, super happy to be here. I want to introduce my partners for tonight and my partners for every day. We have Kathy Myers, and she is our assistant superintendent for student services. Kathy, wave. And then we have Mike Herforth, who's our assistant superintendent for curriculum and instruction. I think you've seen our faces now for over the last few months a lot. And you have Cindy Mendenhall, who is the assistant to the superintendent. And then hiding behind his picture is Jacob Lopez, who is our director of technology, who has done wonders in making all of these communications possible for us and for our kids. All right, so we're going to get started. I do want to start with just a few words of gratitude. I think it's very, very important to recognize that you as parents have been acting as teachers as well for the last 3 months and teaching your own kids. There's nothing like it. It's can be very, very challenging under circumstances of stress. And I just want to say thank you for hanging in there. Thank you for doing a great job. We really, really appreciate the partnership. And we wish it was a little bit easier and more ideal, but we got through it, and we just thank you for all of that. I also want to thank you for your patience. We have been trying to get information out to you, but we can only be as good as the information that we get at the time to tell us what we can or can't do as we start to plan. So it's very important that you keep in mind tonight that the information that you get most of it will stay the same. Safety, health protocols, many of those things are going to stay the same, but it's fluid and things are changing rapidly within the state, within our county. And so we will be presenting where we are right now. So we will do our best to offer initial information. The information will be fairly general just because we only have a limited amount of time tonight. And the details are still also in the works. We hope to get some feedback on a couple of items along the way through the chat boxes. We will answer some of the questions along the way. I think that's going to be a little difficult. We did receive the questions that you filled out earlier, and we will slowly be able to put together some of those answers. Some of them are very specific and were difficult to include in the presentation tonight, but we do appreciate everything that you're giving us. And then we will, at the end, describe 3 potential hybrid instruction models that really are geared towards the elementary grades. So just some etiquette for tonight. The chat boxes will be monitored. We obviously expect respect in terms of the comments made or questions asked. And we thank you for that. And then we are if we are asking, I know that there's already been some comments in the chat box. I actually can't see it. But if you could wait through the presentation before making too many comments, I think what happens is the comments start to take us off into a different place, and then we can't always listen to what's being said. So anyway, it might be helpful. We are recording the session, as I said. And any comments and feedback that you give us, we are able to collect and look at later. So don't hesitate to share your thoughts. So here we are, many of us in this time of the COVID-19 pandemic, we are probably feeling tired, anxious. The anxiety is probably coming from uncertainty. We could be sad. We're mourning the loss of activities that we know our children would be thriving in, activities that we thrive in. Things are just different. And we're worried. We're worried about our students, our kids, each other, and we're confused because a day doesn't go by when you get a piece of information that's different than about the same topic that you just got the day before that gave you something else to be thinking over. So it's all of these things right now. And we've been charged with the monumental task of opening schools safely. So I'd like this quote from the LA Times a couple of days ago. This spring was tough. Reopening schools will almost certainly be tougher, but leaving students to stumble through another year without real learning is unacceptable. So that is the take from Rincon Valley, that we need to figure out how to do the best we possibly can given the circumstances for our students. And we know that we have extremely strong partners in our parents, so thank you. So we are reinventing school as we know it. Would we rather be back at school as normal, full classes every day? Yes. Do we need to do our best to keep everyone safe and healthy? Absolutely. Do students deserve and need an opportunity to have some in-person learning opportunities? Yes. Will there be an element of choice to continue to distance learning? Yes. What's guiding us? Who's telling us what we can or can't do? Well, we get our guidance from the county. So Sonoma County Public Health Office and the Sonoma County Office of Education work together. They based their guidance that came out just last Friday. They based their guidance on the state guidance from Public Health and the California Department of Ed. Other factors come into play. We have local conditions we need to consider. We need to consider our budget. We need to consider how much state flexibility we're going to get in terms of instructional minutes and attendance. These factors are fluid and ever-changing, and we will be prepared to make adjustments. A fall planning task force has been getting together over the last month or so, preparing recommendations on what opening schools will look like that we hope to take to the board on July 14th. In the meantime, we hope to give you continued communication and surveys to both staff and parents. We must consider working conditions with our bargaining units and safety of our employees when making decisions. We will be making a couple of critical decisions this week to present a basic plan to all families on Monday. After that, quickly after that, our next step will be identifying families who need and prefer the distance learning model. That will take some planning and time, so we need to know who would like that model. So the mission of our task force is to take the parameters that we are given to create the best learning programs possible for our students that support health and safety of our school community. Our guiding principles: protect student, staff, and community health, foster student learning and progress, maintain positive learning environments, foster student emotional health, and care for our most vulnerable populations. The basic county parameters for opening schools. This is a 40-page document that we tried to condense down to the most specific ones, or down to a summary here in the next couple of slides. So they are recommending, or the parameters recommend, a hybrid model. If you can't keep your classes down full-time to 12 to 15 students. So because of the 6-foot physical distancing when possible information, it will not be possible to have all schools in class with classes of up to 20 to 24 to 28 to 32 kids all in a class at the same time. Face coverings are recommended but not required for students under 12. It's direct language from the parameters. Siblings will be assigned to the same schedule. Distance learning and home study is available to high-risk students or families, or those who choose. Be prepared to have in-person learning fall into total distance learning on short notice. So if the Sonoma Public Health says we have to go back into shelter in place, then we might have to have a school closure. We will restrict the mixing of groups as much as possible so the students stay in their cohort throughout the entire day. We will be working with public health for contact tracing, notification if student staff member is diagnosed with COVID-19. We will restrict shared spaces and items. Student belongings will be kept separate. Right now, there are no field trips, assemblies, large gatherings, visitors, sports, after school enrichment programs. Those will not be happening to begin with. We will have reminder signs and messaging, reminding kids to physically distance, staff members to physically distance, to remind people to wash their hands, use the hand sanitizer. Meals will be eaten or served with the cohort model. Cohorts have recess and breaks together. We will have temperature and health checks both at home and at school, and daily sanitizing of classrooms. So remember, I told you I'd give you broad information, but there are many, many details in this document that we will be posting on our website. So it's important, you guys all have neighbors and we all live in Santa Rosa here, and there are lots of different talk around parents and families about what their district is doing. And it comes down to, it is a local district choice, as long as you stay within those parameters. And I'm finding that a lot of the choices really depend on what grade level spans are. Like if you are in a high school district, you might be having to consider some different models. Depends on your resources. Depends on what your stakeholders kind of tell you, what the student need might be. Which existing programs can you already build off? For example, for Rincon Valley, the home study program, what your funding is like, and transportation. We plan to offer an element of choice. So families with vulnerable health conditions or otherwise concerned will need a choice of distance learning or home study. The distance learning will need to be different. We know that this time, if someone's in distance learning for the entire school year, it needs to be robust. New instruction needs to be included, grading, attendance, and accountability. So this will not be the same distance learning model that you experienced in the spring. And we will be offering a hybrid in-person offering is also being created. This is a great graphic from the Sonoma County Office of Education that really talks about kind of the different levels and different types of learning that we kind of have to be prepared for. And we might have to be in one for some time and then go into another and then back into another. We're not sure, but we're going to plan for all 4 of these. So there's the traditional learning model, of which we were still doing at the beginning of March 2020. You have the hybrid learning model, which is what we will be describing later on in this presentation, where students come to school just part-time, and then they complete some of their work at home or at extended care or daycare. And then we have the distance learning model. And then we have this blue box over here that says planning to pivot for school closure. So for whatever reason, the public health officer says we need to close a school or close the district or close the county, we have to be ready and prepare the students ahead of time for what school is going to look like when they go home again with you. So small cohorts of students means fewer students in a classroom at a time to allow for that 6 feet of separation. 12 to 15 students in a classroom at a time. Only way to accommodate this model is to alternate time students are on campus. The popular models are a Monday, Thursday. So a cohort A comes to school on Monday and Thursday, and cohort B comes to school on Tuesday and Friday. That is one of the options. The other option is actually you can do a Monday, Tuesday, and then a day in between for deep cleaning, and then Thursday, Friday, the next set of cohorts. So we'll be talking more about that in a second. And then the other option is AMPM. So Half the cohort comes in the morning for 3 hours. There's an hour break in between, and then the next half of the cohort comes. And that cohort, those two cohorts together, I wanted to explain this, whether it's 2 days, full days a week, or whether they come 4 days a week for AMPM, those two cohorts together become a classroom if we were ever to go into full school again. So that if we were to have to adjust, the teacher and the student stay the same. They still have that same class. So even though the two cohorts don't ever really mix in this hybrid model, when school comes back together or when we can open fully, the good thing for the students is that they'll have the same teacher in the same. And if we go into distance learning, that will be their teacher. So we really want to be able to have that connection that we know is so important. 1 day a week would be full distance learning and or independent study to allow for teacher prep planning and training. And it might end up being a little bit of a shorter day because teachers might have to work longer days to accommodate the schedule on the other 4 days. And siblings will be placed in similar schedules with the potential exception of RVCS. RVCS 7th and 8th grade is determining their own model, and it's possible that it'll correspond with the elementary model, and it's possible that it won't. So, okay. So I think, Kathy, it's your turn.
It is. So again, looking at our guiding principles, we know that the health and safety of our students and our staff is foremost. So we are looking at and will be considering promoting, obviously, behaviors that will reduce the spread, which could include, again, wearing face masks. Even though there's a guideline that students 12 and under don't have to, we are considering highly encouraging and supporting students to wear masks at school. Social distancing, of course, that's part of the reason why we will have fewer students in classrooms. Face covering, and we talked about that one. We are looking at adults and teachers being able to wear face shields. We recognize how hard it will be for some students to understand the nonverbal communication if they can't see that smile or see how a teacher is saying something. We will have adequate supplies, and that means having thermometers in classrooms, gloves, face shields, face masks, hand sanitizers. We know that that is critical to people, both our staff and our families, feeling comfortable with having school open and in person. We'll have signs and messaging around the campus, just reminding everybody about the social distancing and the COVID symptoms, how we can reduce the spread. Frequent hand washing, and hand sanitizing will be built into the schedules that we have that regularly happening for our students. If we do have a student who does spike a fever or identify one of the symptoms of the COVID virus, we do have an isolation room, and we will have the student be able to be there and safe there with adult supervision until he or she can be picked up by a parent and go home. We are also looking at ways to do contact tracing so that we know that if there is an outbreak in a classroom, we have a way to identify any of the adults or staff or people who had been in that class or had contact with that classroom. So just if you don't mind, we'd love some feedback from you in our chat boxes. We won't be able to report out on it right now. It will be information that we will be reviewing later as we're working towards our decision. What are your thoughts about face coverings for students? So please feel free to put that in the chat boxes. We are definitely looking for input. We'll give you a minute and then we will move on, but thank you. I see the responses flying in. I can't read them, but I see the numbers ticking up. So again, thank you. We appreciate your feedback.
Okay, we're going to move on. Thank you so much. All right.
Got it. Good. Remembering the order of our slides. We know how important it is for all of our families, in addition to our staff, to be notified and to know that they will be notified if we have a student or staff member identified and diagnosed with the COVID. And we recognize that we hope that you will all understand how critical the privacy and confidentiality of that is. We will be able to share information that we have somebody, but we will not be able to share information as to specifically who that individual is. We are already preparing for ways to support and teach students about how to communicate positively and how to respond if they are aware that another student or somebody has been diagnosed, so that we can avoid the discrimination and potential hurt feelings of being identified as a student who has become ill. We will be requiring that parents keep children who are ill home. We will have a checklist that we will be asking parents to go through, and many of you who have been out to a doctor or dentist have probably done that yourself, checking a temperature and checking some symptoms or contacts. We will be needing to exclude any student, parent, or caregiver who is showing any of the symptoms. And we will be monitoring students throughout the day. A student with a fever of over 100 degrees, cough, or other symptoms will be escorted and supported in that isolation room until we can have a parent or adult come in, an approved adult, come and take that child home. We will be notifying our public health officials, and we recognize they will also be notifying us if we have an identified student or adult in our district, so that we can take the proper measures to either close a classroom, or at the public health officer's guidance, it could be a school or the district. We will again be working with the public health department and our own system for contact tracing. We have a methodology we will be using so that anybody again who's entering a classroom can scan a QR code. That could be a specialist, that could be a nurse, it could be the principal, so that we recognize who has been in that room and potentially exposed or around that cohort of students. If your child was in contact with someone who's been diagnosed, you will be contacted. Guidelines for the closing of their classrooms and schools will be guided by our public health officials, and we will share that information if we need to go to that length.
Okay, so moving on to food service, just a couple quick things. So obviously food service will have to be adjusted. We will adjust to health protocols and safety standards. We will adjust the delivery model depending on which of the two hybrid or three hybrid models we choose. We plan to offer meals during complete shelter in place, just like we're doing right now. And we will also allow meals for students who can come by who are doing distance learning or home study. We plan to have all eating done outdoors if possible, staggered locations, and they will eat with their cohort, their group. Obviously lots of washing of hands, but we believe that the fresh air is a good place for them to be for eating. And of course, unfortunately, we have to limit some of our options, no salad bars, no trays, all for the health and safety of the students. Transportation, so busing is gotten a little tricky, but students and staff need to wear face coverings at all times when they're on the buses. We will keep the windows open to maximize ventilation. Siblings will sit together, no more than 2 students per seat. The drivers will need to clean the buses in between bus loads, so that will slow the process down. We will train our bus drivers accordingly. They've already done a great job with that. We will be prioritizing students in special education who need the service to get to the school that they're attending. And we will probably need to modify bus routes. And we will have a more limited ability to transport as many students as we've been able to do in the past. Extended care. So we will be offering extended care on all of our campuses, and we will be providing them at alternate schedules, depending on the model that we choose once again. Right now, we're determining how many extended care spots we have available. We are identifying rooms, spaces, and staff. What's great about our extended care staff is they've had lots of experience already providing extended care in the COVID-19 environment. And they have been providing essential care, and they have been, their summer camp has started. So we are able to learn a lot from their experiences on how best to protect and keep everybody safe and healthy. And we do know that it's okay for limited mixing of cohort groups. So if you are in one cohort group during the school day, and then you go to an extended care and it's a slightly different cohort group, that's okay. Obviously cleaning, sanitizing, washing hands, sanitize, all that going on. But also as long as we know where students have been and we can track where they've been, that's the most important part for the contact tracing piece. And then all other of the health and cleaning protocols applied that we've already discussed. Kathy.
Sure. As we talked about all the different feelings that we're feeling, it is, I can only imagine the anxiety that our students are experiencing. Their short understanding and knowledge of school is going to change drastically. And for our new kinders and TKs, it will be a whole new world. So we know that there will be anxiety about returning and it not looking the same. So we do have a team of counselors and they will be preparing, and you will be receiving some conversation starters, some videos on just even wearing masks and how to not be as nervous, or how to communicate if you're concerned because you can't see a person's face and what their expressions are. We'll be preparing information to help you get routines started for students. In distance learning, it was probably a little bit easier to sleep in a little bit, go to bed a little bit later. Getting into the groove, if you will be participating in school instruction, means starting those routines early, because it has been a long time since those students have been at school every day. We will be sending out a survey before school even starts so that we have information to prepare for your child to come to school. If the teacher knows ahead of time that your child is feeling anxious or is concerned about a mask or is having, challenges keeping their mask on, they can be prepared to work ahead and support you and your child. Once school is in session, we will also be serving age appropriate, there'll be a couple different kinds of surveys, our students to see how they're feeling, how are they doing, how can we further support them with their acclimation to the new school year. Our mental health team, which is our counselors and school psychologists, will be working directly with teachers to help the whole new system. What we don't want, and we know our teachers don't want, is to be constantly redirecting and having to remind, I think everyone has seen on Facebook, Johnny, please take the face mask off your knee. It's not a knee pad. No, it doesn't go on your elbow. How do we turn that into something positive and encouraging students to wear their masks and look at social distancing? So coming up with songs and different ways that we can make it a little bit more fun and easier reminders, of course, age appropriate. And we just ask that, again, please start working with your children now, getting them accustomed to wearing a face mask, accustomed to being socially distant, building that routine to get them ready for school. And we will be providing some additional resources to you before the school year begins.
All right, so good evening to all of you. Thank you for being here, and we appreciate being able to get an opportunity to get a little feedback from all of you. And I'm going to talk specifically more about some of the instructional models of what it could look like when we are actually in school session starting in August. So one of the things we want to try and define is distance learning a little bit, because there's actually multiple ways that the distance learning could happen for families. So as our superintendent described a little bit earlier, we're going to have some hybrid model options that we're going to discuss a little bit later on that I'll go into in a couple of slides here. But if those models don't work for a family, One distance learning model is families would be able to choose to be in a full distance learning model. Or they could choose to be in home study. And I'm going to describe the two differences of distance learning and homeschool on the next slide. So for some families, they may be choosing to do full distance learning. We as a district are going to have to be prepared to move into distance learning at any time if there's a surge in cases and our county health director tells us that we have to go into that mode. So we're going to plan and prepare to move into a distance learning mode for all students if we have to, based on a surge in any of the COVID-19 cases. And then there'll be distance learning, which there's a little confusion on this with the wording, but there's going to be distance learning for all students when they're not actually attending school in person. So even if you are doing one of the hybrid models that we will describe here in a few minutes, those may be a couple of days a week, or it might be 4 days a week, but only half days. And so the time that they're not in school, like actually personally sitting in school, then there would be some time for distance learning at home as well. So 3 different ways: full distance learning for those who choose it, full distance learning if we're told we have to go into that, and then there'll be some form of distance learning for those students when they're not actually sitting in person in school. And as Tracy mentioned earlier, the distance learning will need to be different. We will do some training with our teachers and students and parents and whatnot ahead of time, and have very clear expectations for the work accountability and attendance. This type of distance learning we're moving into is going to be very different than the distance learning that we already had previously with the last couple months of the school year. That was the first time any of our schools have ever been doing that, and we really had to train teachers. It was the end of the year and getting them caught up, and this would be more of a different process and different expectation where new teaching would be happening in that distance learning mode. So what I want to really make clear, because I don't think people really understand, that there is a difference between distance learning and home study. So in home study, we already have that program that has existed in our district for years and will continue to exist. In home study, the materials and the supports are provided by a home study teacher. So we employ a home study teacher that helps provide the families that's involved in a home study the materials and the resources for them to be doing at home. The big difference is that in home study, it's the parent who is the teacher. So parents make a commitment to instructing their students throughout the week. So we offer home study for all of our grades, but parents make a commitment, and I believe it's grades first and up. I think it differs a little bit for kindergarten. I don't know the exact amount, so I don't want to say it incorrectly, but for first and up, parents make a commitment to being the instructor to their student for a minimum of 20 hours per week. In distance learning, the difference is distance learning is very teacher directed by one of our teachers. Our teacher is teaching the students. They're just teaching it in a distant format. It's not the parent who becomes the teacher in that case. Now, I know in our previous distance learning that we ended this year with, a lot of you as parents were having to do some of the teaching, a lot of the teaching, because that was a different way of being able to do distance learning. But the distance learning that will happen from now on will definitely be way more teacher directed, not leaning on the parent to actually do the teaching. Parents may do some support, but it would be definitely done much more by a distance learning teacher. So definitely a difference there between home study and distance learning. And then we have some different hybrid models that we're going to go into more depth on. Kathy Myers is going to talk to you in just one slide here about special day, and then Tracy Smith's going to talk to you about the RVCS model. Then I'll come back on and talk to you about the different elementary models and the 2 different models, or 3 different models that we are looking at this point. So I'll turn it over to Kathy to talk about the special ed.
Yes. So we are very fortunate to run a variety of special education programs. We have everything from preschool through our 6th grade, and we have small self-contained classes taught by special education teachers. We have occupational therapists, speech pathologists, people who push in and support general education students also. So we have made a commitment that our students who are in those self-contained classrooms taught by a special education teacher, because there are 12 or fewer students in those classes, we will be able to run those the full 4 days and full days. There may be some individual differences. Teachers will work directly with families. Each of those students has an individualized plan. And if that student does need something different, a shorter day or fewer days, they will work that out directly with them. We recognize that because we have so many specialists who serve a variety of schools and programs, that we are still looking at whether we will be asking them to push into the classroom or whether they will be taking their small group or a couple of students out to a separate location to do the interventions and services that are required for that student's plan. Again, recognizing that the safety of those students and our staff are foremost in our minds. Each family of a student who has special needs and an individualized education plan will have a conversation and a meeting in the fall, because we will need to make those adjustments and identify the needs of those individual students given the new model, which is different than us being fully back in person. We will be providing some services in person when students are there at school. We will also be looking at providing services to students through distance learning. Assessments is an area that we are still getting guidance on and how we will do that. That does put an adult in close contact with a child when we're doing assessments. So we are still looking at additional guidance and protective manners to keep our staff and of course our students safe.
Okay, so Rincon Valley Charter School, our 7th and 8th grade program, located on 2 separate campuses. They are together as a staff developing their plan according to the programmatic and developmental needs of that age student. So 7th and 8th grade needs are very different than the elementary, and they might end up choosing a different hybrid model than the elementary group. And then I just wanted to let people know who are here for the RVCS discussion. Pretty much the rest of the discussion for tonight will be about the elementary models. So if you don't stay for the whole thing, that's okay, but just wanted to let you know that we will have some more information specific to your program coming your way soon.
All right, so I'm going to try to describe the couple of different models for the elementary model that we're looking at. Tracy, if you could go back one slide, I think. Thanks. So one of the models that we are looking at, and let me preface this with, we've looked at several different models. We have and through the task force and the subcommittees that Tracy talked about, we have pared it down to these 3 different models, really based on many different factors. On what we think is going to be best for students on instruction and safety and logistics and multiple different things. So we're just kind of talking about these 3 models at this point for tonight. So one of them is the AMPM model. So just to describe that, make sure we're all clear, half of the students would be coming to school in person for the AM in the morning, and then they would leave and go home or to aftercare or whatever the situation would be for those families. And then the other half of the students would be coming in the afternoon for in-person instruction. So half in the morning, half in the afternoon, families would be assigned to different, either the AM or the PM model. So some of the pros and the cons that have come out of several different discussions through this, and again, these are not all the pros, these are not all the cons. Most of these pros and cons are being looked at from an instructional standpoint. There was a different safety subcommittee that looked at all of the safety and health parts of things. So what's listed here is mostly the instructional and a couple of the logistical pieces to consider as well. So a lot of the pros that came out of this was that an AMPM model allows students to come to school for instruction and interaction with their teacher for 4 days a week. Being able to see and make eye contact, build relationships with their teachers and socializing with friends. And way more accountability, which we know was a huge issue with the previous distance learning that we were doing. So to be able to have more accountability with focused instruction 4 days a week. And a large part of this conversation was in the elementary system. We know that we're dealing with younger students. The importance of being able to come to school every day or 4 days a week to see their teacher, to build the routine, and especially when we're talking about learning early literacy and learning to read, to be able to do that on a more continual basis was a real pro for the AMPM model. Students would then complete independent study assignments for half of the day that they're not on in-person instruction, instead of having to do it for multiple full days at home. That was a huge pro in this model, because we know that in the distance learning that we have previously done, it was extremely difficult for families to have their students or their children home all day for multiple days trying to do a distance learning. So this would allow more accountability on checking in on a regular basis, and then allow just a half a day at home each of those days where independent study assignments would be happening as a distance learning model. From a logistical standpoint, the lunch and the recess duty and coordinating all of the safety with that doesn't take effect in an AMPM model. Those students who would need lunch or prefer to have lunch, a school lunch, it would be more of a grab and go lunch model. So we don't need to coordinate and worry about the safety of students sitting in the tables at the multipurpose room or in their classrooms and all of that. Some of the cons to the AMPM model is, from a teacher standpoint, the pacing of the curriculum will seem a little bit faster, because if they're only there for half of the day, the students are only there for half of the day, then teachers are going to be feeling like they got to get through some of this curriculum a little bit faster. And on the flip side of that, it'll be more focused curriculum strictly towards language arts and math, and building in some of the other content areas as we can fit in as well. Pickups and drop-off transitions was a factor that we need to really consider, especially for parents and the safety of students coming up onto campus and off of campus. And then cleaning the classrooms. And I said, so from a safety subcommittee, they're dealing with that. And we are very committed to making sure that we get the classrooms cleaned from whatever model we choose. But on an AMPM model, it would be a little bit different. And we would have to make sure that we're trying to do that before the next group comes in. So different from the AMPM model is our 2-day cohort model. And as Tracy described to you, there's two differences in the 2-day cohort model. One of them is half of the students come on Monday for a full day, and those same half come on Tuesday for a full day. And then the other half of students come on Thursday for a full day and on Friday for a full day. The alternate model in the 2-day cohort is half of the students who come Monday come again on Thursday, and the half of the students that come on Tuesday come again on Friday. The reason for the differences is it depends on how much we want to have students being on distance learning for multiple days. So to go through that with some of the pros and cons, some of the pros are that students get longer days at school. So not just a half day, they're getting a full day, and maybe the teacher pacing won't seem so quick. Off days allow for symptoms to appear before returning to school. So from a safety standpoint, we know that that's a concern for some of our families and our staff, and fewer human contact throughout the day because you're there for the full day. Some of the cons are that staff, some of our staff who have children would need care, as well as our parents who are going to need care for now a full day of extended care or aftercare, rather than only needing it for a half day. Not as many touch points for students with their teachers, which I was referring to in the AMPM model. A lot of discussion was had about how in the elementary system, having more touch points for students who can actually come on a regular basis is better for them, better for the instruction. And another con on this was harder to teach phonics, and I kind of mentioned this, harder to teach phonics and early literacy when you're only seeing students a couple days a week and not being able to do that each day and building those routines in. So one thing that has to really be clarified is, and this was big for our staff when we had a conversation as well, is the difference between the two different 2-day cohorts is some students would then be on distance learning for up to 3 days in a row. So as parents, that's part of the feedback we need to get is from a scheduling standpoint, AM, PM, you have your students coming every day or 4 days a week for half of the day, if we did some of these 2-day cohort models, is that better for parents? But considering that you're going to have your child home for up to 3 days in a row for full days, and distance learning would have to happen in that way, similar like we have done it in the past. So what we're going to ask, and I know there's been a lot of questions and chats being put in there, but if you could hold off on the questions for a second, just so we can kind of see some feedback a little bit. We're going to ask that you just provide some of your thoughts on an AMPM model or one of the 2-day cohort models. You could simply just type in AMPM or 2-day cohort, or you could be way more descriptive and give us some feedback in that way about your concerns as well. So we'll give you a couple of minutes and be quiet here so you can just put some information down in the chat boxes. And as you're doing that, I do want to clarify, I didn't clarify this just as people are chatting in. When we talk about the hybrid models of either the AMPM or the 2-day cohort, if neither of those works for a family, you would also have the option of doing distance learning or home study. So just know that we would offer a hybrid model, and we're also going to have staff that are going to be dedicated to just doing distance learning for families that need full distance learning. And we will have staff dedicated to home study for the families that want to choose home study as well. So I really appreciate all the feedback. Thank you. And we will read through all of these comments, and you can keep them coming if you haven't had a chance to put it down yet. And I also just want to reiterate that, of course, we would all love to be able to have our students back in school full time every day. We know that that's what's best for education of all of them. That's what's best for families in their work schedules, but we may not be able to do that based on the health county guidelines. And so that's why we are looking at these different options. It's not that this is necessarily the route that we just are choosing and wanting to go. We may have to go into one of these routes based on the information that we're provided by county health. So we totally understand that this puts an impact on families, it puts an impact on work schedules, and that's why we want to get some of this feedback so we can just choose the model that's going to be best for our students and for our staff and for our families.
All right, please keep responding as things come up. We appreciate it very much. So there was additional questions that have come up from here and there along the way. I think I have 150 responses that came in on the survey, and some of them were very specific. I could not possibly answer them all in this time period, but we will work on gathering that information that you need. But just a few things that have come up. So people asked about, well, what if we have PSPS events on top of this? Well, it sounds like we will have PSPS events. However, we are hoping that we will have some kind of solution at some point where we will be able to power up the whole community during these events, but we haven't heard word yet on what that might look like. So we'll see how that goes. But if we have a PSPS event, just remember that if we end up shutting down the entire district because we don't have power, then we have 2 emergency days built into this calendar this year that happen, they're bookended on the spring break. So right now they are making extended spring break, but if we end up having 2 emergency days in the fall due to fires or PSPS events, then we will have those 2 days will become student days. So we were able to build in the emergency days this year. The question is, what if we don't reach stage 3? So I think we might have gone into stage 3 today. I don't know, but it looks like that was a question that came up, like if we're not in stage 3, which technically is what we're supposed to be in to reopen schools, I think that there's no concern that at this point we should be in stage 3 by the time August comes around. The question about will there be shifts in curriculum and in teaching? Absolutely. And we will need to work strategically and what would we say, smarter, not harder, to make sure that the students are getting the essential learning that they need, and also taking into account that there will be some acceleration that needs to happen in their students' learning due to all the non-in-person learning from last spring. And then there was a question about what flexibility do we have to go remote if we start to feel uneasy, and there should be flexibility for that. And we understand that times change, feelings change, and we would just work with each family individually to see what we could do. And then just remember that back to school night will have to be virtual. We can't have you all in a gym, but that might be great because it'll be really easy for you to attend and see your teacher. And we will also be providing before school video trainings, give you a sense of what school's going to look like, that you can even watch with your kid so that you will know with your students so that they can have a sense of what school might look and feel when they get there. So a little bit of anticipatory learning. And one of the things that we definitely have to be thinking about is substitute teachers. This is not something that we've completely resolved. We do have some very loyal substitute teachers, but we're not sure that they're going to be comfortable coming in to teach. And so there's just some details we have to work out to make sure that we have enough in case teachers start to get sick. Or their kids start to get sick. Manipulatives, we'll be thinking about how we manage manipulatives in the classroom in terms of sharing and little baggies and how to keep those together individually and not sharing those. And then there was a question on Chromebooks. So right now, the current thinking is that the 3rd through 6th graders would actually be issued a Chromebook that they would use as their own while they're in school. And then they would get to take it with them to extended care to complete independent study or all the different assignments that they need to complete when they're not in the classroom with the teacher. So that it would be kind of a back and forth exchange, so that there's some continuity and we know that everybody has what they need. For the little ones, we don't want them actually on the computer quite so much. So we won't need them to have a Chromebook at school, but we'll make sure that any extra Chromebooks that we have, we'll make sure that every family can have one at home in case there is some small work that can be done on the Chromebook. Okay, just a couple other additional questions. Will there be an option to open full time? I think I started with there's always that possibility, it sounds like. I think that no matter what, we will always have to be super cautious when it comes to the health and safety protocols. But this would ultimately be everybody's goal. So we'll keep our fingers crossed. Question, do we have to match the Santa Rosa City Schools model? And the answer at this point is no, mostly because they have middle school that'll probably be different than high school, different to elementary, and it's just way too complicated to get all of our schools to match in this regard. And then just a reminder, all of our meetings, probably even parent-teacher conferences, will be held virtually, just as, once again, safety precaution. And is there a chance that these protocols might change in the future? I can pretty much bet on it, but we just don't know which way and how. How will we make sure that we are able to meet the needs of our special education students? Thank you so much, Kathy, for describing the plan. And we will be reaching out to individual families to discuss the individual needs for our students. So that's going to be happening as well. And will there be flexibility to move from one program to another? And I think the answer is yes, but it also depends on what the different models are. So if we can't really add another second grader to a second grade classroom and they were distance learning, we just have to see based on space available. Okay, what to expect next?
Okay, so again, as Dr. Smith said earlier, we have a task force that has, there's a variety of smaller subcommittees that have been meeting on every topic from food service to extended care to transportation to the learning models that we've shared to mental health, health and safety, special education. We've been trying to look at this challenge from each angle so that we can come together, and every Friday we meet as a task force. So we will be meeting tomorrow, and we will be making a decision on the model, the hybrid model that we will be able to present to you. We will communicate that decision to staff, and then of course be able to share that with all of you. Almost an immediate turnaround, early next week, we will be sending out a survey because, as we talked about, we want to give you the option of choosing a home study, distance learning, or the hybrid model that has been identified. We want to hear from you so that as we're planning, we have the resources in place to support your child in whichever model is selected for you. We will use that information as we're, again, adjusting classrooms, identifying distance learning teachers, and then be able to provide that information to you enough in advance for you to be able to plan the start of the school year. With that in mind, we are in the process of looking at adjusting the first day of school. So the last time you saw a calendar, it probably said August 12th. With all of these changes, we recognize how important it is to work with our staff, review the different cleaning protocols, health and safety protocols, the distance learning, the in-class learning. So we will be looking at moving our student start date to August 17th. What that will do is, again, provide us additional time with our teachers before students arrive to better prepare them to be educating our students.
Okay, so we, Kathy, Mike, anything to add?
We've got this.
We've got this. We will be reading. I can't wait to go through the chat box and take in all the great information you gave us and how you're feeling. And we will be hoping that, like Kathy said, by tomorrow we will, we're hoping to make a decision by tomorrow and prepare some communication for you on Monday. And always keep in mind that things could change, but this is where this is our launching pad. This is where we're going to start. And one of the key things is we need to understand who really thinks that they need the distance learning, because we need to get going to make sure that we get that program that up and going and we have teachers selected and et cetera. So that would be really helpful. Okay, so keep in mind, we have the capacity to make this work. We need the option for students to be back in school. We need flexibility, we need to follow the guidelines, and we need protocols for communication. We will adjust as we go along, and we will make the most of what we have been given. And we need to continue to work as partners, and you're appreciated. So you know where to find us. The form is still open. If you think of something else, we will look at all your comments and review them, and you'll hear more from us on Monday. All right. Good night, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you guys very much.
Good question.